My husband's lover thought she won, until I met her fiancé on a cruise. She believed she'd stolen my husband forever, but fate had other plans. When I met her fiancé on that cruise, everything changed forever. The email arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, 3:17 p.m., to be exact. A notification from our shared family cloud popped up on my screen. Paradise Cruise Lines, your luxury suite awaits. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to him, my husband, Daniel. For a split second, I thought it was a mistake, some spam that had slipped through filters. But then I saw it, Suite 1243, Deck 10, Champagne Package for 2. There was another name listed next to his. Vanessa. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Instead, a strange calm spread through me, like the quiet that comes before a storm. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of school recitals, mortgage payments, and anniversaries that felt more like obligations than celebrations, all condensed into that single word. Vanessa. I read the itinerary twice. A 5-day Caribbean cruise. Ocean view balcony suite. Couples massage. The same man who forgot my birthday last year was apparently remembering every romantic cliché in the book for another woman. He had texted me an hour earlier, working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I almost laughed. Working late, apparently, now meant sailing into sunsets with his lover. I walked into our bedroom, the air suddenly heavy. His suits hung neatly beside my dresses, his world blending seamlessly with mine. How many times had he come home smelling like cologne and excuses? How many times had I convinced myself he was just tired, not distant? And then, as if the universe wanted to confirm my worst fears, another notification blinked. A photo. A woman in a mirror, blonde, perfect, wearing new lingerie with the tag still attached. The caption read, "Can't wait for you to take this off on our trip. Counting the days." It was Vanessa, the new customer service director at his company. The same Vanessa who'd looked at me with that practiced smile during the Christmas party and said, "You're so lucky to have him." The funny thing is, I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was precision. A clarity that only betrayal can bring. Because I suddenly remembered something she'd said at that party, something about her fiancé, a brilliant tech guy named Bradley. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the photo still open, and whispered to myself, "Oh, Vanessa, you have no idea what you've just started." The next thing I did was type her full name into the search bar. Vanessa Pierce. Her profile was public, of course it was. Hundreds of photos flooded my screen. Brunches. Beach poses. Engagement ring selfies with captions like, "Forever starts in June, ring sparkles." And there he was. Her fiancé. Bradley Collins. I recognized him from the corporate news posts my husband sometimes scrolled through, the golden boy of Silicon Valley startups. Tall, clean-cut, smile so white it almost hurt to look at. I scrolled deeper, my fingers steady. One photo caught my eye. A recent post from Bradley himself, heading on a solo trip before the wedding madness begins. Time to clear my head. The timestamp matched the cruise departure date exactly. I leaned back, heart thudding, but not from pain. It was something else now, a pulse of cold satisfaction. My husband's lover wasn't just cheating with a married man. She was cheating on her own fiancé. And they'd both chosen the same floating palace of lies to celebrate it. I opened a new tab and searched Paradise Cruise Lines Deck 10 layout. It took me 10 minutes to find the ship's plan, another 5 to locate their suite, 1243. My mouse hovered over the cabin next door. 1245, available. I didn't even think twice. My credit card was already in my hand. "Two can play this game," I whispered, clicking confirm booking. Within minutes, an email arrived in my inbox, my own ticket to the same cruise, same deck, same fate. But I wasn't done. Oh, no. I still had one more call to make. I found Bradley's company website, scanned until I located his professional email, and wrote a short, sharp message. Mr. Collins. I believe we have something important to discuss regarding our respective partners and their upcoming Caribbean cruise. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow morning? It concerns your fiancée Vanessa, and my husband, Daniel. I attached a screenshot of the cruise confirmation. For a full minute, the cursor blinked. Then, 3 little dots appeared. Typing. Stopping. Typing again. His reply arrived 3 minutes later. Where and when? That's all he said. For the first time since I saw the name Vanessa, I smiled. It wasn't the smile of a broken wife, it was the smile of someone who had just found her perfect ally. The next morning, I arrived early at the cafe downtown, the kind of place where people came to close deals or end relationships. The smell of roasted espresso mixed with polished marble and quiet tension. I sat at a corner table, facing the entrance, my coffee untouched. When Bradley walked in, I recognized him instantly. He had that confident, effortless posture of someone used to being the smartest person in the room, though now, his expression was tight, almost brittle. His phone was still in his hand, and when his eyes met mine, there was a flash of grim understanding. He didn't bother with small talk. "Show me everything," he said, sitting across from me. I slid my phone over, the booking confirmation, the photo of Vanessa in her lingerie, the time-stamped messages. He scrolled in silence, jaw clenched. When he finally looked up, there was a raw mix of anger and disbelief. So, this is what she meant when she said she needed space before the wedding. His laugh was dry. Space on a luxury cruise with your husband. Seems that way, I replied evenly. We sat there, 2 strangers bound by betrayal, trying to map out the ruin of our lives with caffeine and quiet fury. I don't just want to confront them, I said finally. I want them to see what they've done. To each other. To us. Bradley leaned back, eyes narrowing. You're thinking revenge. I'm thinking exposure, I corrected. And I already have a cabin booked. Right next to theirs. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then his mouth curved into a slow, deliberate smile, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm in, he said. But we need to be smart. If we're going to do this, we don't just catch them, we destroy the fantasy they've built. We spent the next 2 hours drafting a plan. I'd play the quiet traveler, the accidental neighbor. Bradley would run into Vanessa by chance. We'd act like we'd never met. Every word, every look would be calculated. By the time our coffees had gone cold, we weren't just 2 betrayed partners anymore, we were co-conspirators. As we stood to leave, Bradley extended his hand. To poetic justice. I hesitated for a second before taking it. His grip was firm, steady. To poetic justice, I echoed. Walking out of that cafe, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone rewriting the story, and for once, I was holding the pen. Boarding felt almost ceremonial, a slow-moving river of suitcases, sunscreen, and overpriced sunglasses, but under the surface, everything was electric. Bradley and I had agreed to split up when we checked in. Too obvious to arrive together. Too obvious to be seen coordinating. We would meet later, after the ship had set sail and the crowd thinned. I took my time. I wanted the moment to feel accidental, a woman alone, a little melancholy, the kind of traveler who reads on balconies and drinks too much room service coffee. I practiced my neutral face in the mirrored terminal, not angry, not desperate, just composed. Composition, I had decided, was the new weapon. The ship smelled like lemon polish and sea spray. A pianist near the atrium played something syrupy. Families herded into group photos. I gave the receptionist my name, collected my key card for 12:45, and walked toward the elevators with my carry-on rolling beside me, every step measured. Deck 10. Starboard side. Right next to them. When I opened my cabin door, the first thing I noticed was the faint echo of laughter through the wall that separated 12:45 from 12:43. Timing, it seemed, had a sense of humor. I set my bag down, dragged my hand along the sleek banister, and listened. Nothing but the hum of air conditioning and the distant creak of the hull. Across the corridor, cabin 1243's balcony door stood wide open. A beach towel flapped in the breeze. A bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket. I caught a glimpse of a silhouette, a woman with a high, intentional ponytail. Vanessa. She looked exactly like her photos, polished, practiced, every hair in place like a note in a song. She laughed, high and certain, as a man I recognized by posture and perfume, my husband, leaned in and kissed the side of her neck. Something cold scraped along my spine, but the scrape was accompanied by a steady pulse of purpose. Bradley had taught me a small trick: breathe into your diaphragm and let the shock funnel into focus. I breathed. I finished unpacking. I put on a sundress that read, casual, but whispered, not to be underestimated. Then I left the cabin and wandered the public decks like a woman with no plan at all. Cruise days drift. People nap and nibble and applaud the staff for being charming. Bradley had texted a few hours before boarding, "I'm on. Let me know when you're at the Lido. I'll bump into her at the smoothie stand." He signed it, fittingly, with a small wink emoji. I typed back, 12:30, Lido. Then I deleted the message and put my phone away. We had rehearsed the vague choreography of coincidence until it felt real. At noon I sat at the Lido with a mock-absent stare and watched the flow of passengers. Vanessa appeared like a small storm, confident, bright, surrounded by the attention she seemed to inherit. Daniel, my Daniel, moved as if he owned the horizon. He smiled at her the way you smile at a secret you're enjoying, and each smile landed like a soft stone that created rings in my stomach. And then something unexpected happened. Vanessa pulled her phone from her bag and, without even looking around, typed a message with a focused speed, the kind of quick fingers use when they're composing something important and private. I couldn't read the screen, of course, but I watched her thumb move, watched the mouth form the small smile of someone imagining victory. She hit send and slipped the phone away. Minutes later I caught a phrase as she laughed with a friend across the buffet, "Tonight. After the captain's toast. He'll ask me to go with him." Her friend squealed. Vanessa's eyes slid across the deck like a predator scanning potential paths. She sounded thrilled. Her voice was full of both triumph and an odd tenderness, as if she believed in the fairy tale she was building with my husband. The words landed blunt as a stone. He'll ask me to go with him. That sentence was a fuse. A quiet, dangerous promise of movement, of endings rearranged neatly into beginnings that belonged to someone else. I felt Bradley's presence before I saw him, the polite scrape of a chair, the pivot of a body. He slid into the seat across from me, his face unreadable for a beat, then very intentionally casual. "She said what?" he asked, like a man testing echoes. I told him. He did not smile. He only watched Vanessa across the deck, watched my husband's hand rest just a little too long on her lower back, like a scientist monitoring an experiment where the reactions were about to accelerate. "Tonight," he said, quiet enough for only me to hear. "That changes the timeline." I nodded, feeling the scale tilt. We had planned to make them uncomfortable, embarrass them, expose them. Now there was movement that could push fear to desperation. If Vanessa thought tonight might become an elopement, she might accelerate everything, and if she accelerated, mistakes would follow. On my way back to 12:45, I pressed my palm to the thin wall between our cabins. The reverberation of their laughter trickled through like heat through a joint in a house. I could almost make out the cadence, the comfort in their voices. It sounded real. It sounded immediate. The captain's toast took place at sunset, that strange, golden hour when the world turns cinematic and everyone pretends they belong to a better story. I dressed carefully, a black halter gown, simple but magnetic in candlelight, my hair pinned loose enough to look effortless. If Vanessa was going to make her move tonight, she'd find the scene already taken. Bradley met me in the main lounge, tuxedo crisp, expression unreadable. "They're here," he murmured, tilting his glass toward the crowd near the piano. There they were, Daniel and Vanessa, framed perfectly under the chandelier, laughing like newlyweds. His hand brushed the small of her back as if rehearsed. "Let's make this interesting," Bradley said quietly. He offered his arm. I took it. We entered their orbit like two comets colliding with a sun that thought itself stable. Bradley ordered champagne, I ordered nerve. We stood near enough that Daniel couldn't miss me, though his first glance slid past like a reflex, and then returned, sharp, panicked, unsure. I watched the recognition bloom across his face like a slow bruise. "Is that," Vanessa began, her smile faltering. Daniel's throat bobbed. It can't be." Bradley turned with perfect timing, pretending surprise. "Vanessa? Wow. Small world." Her color drained. "Bradley?" He grinned, charming, practiced. "Didn't know you were cruising this week. You remember?" He gestured to me. I smiled politely. "We've met. Office Christmas party, right?" The silence that followed could have frozen the ocean. Daniel's jaw tightened, Vanessa's nails dug into her glass stem. I could almost hear the click of their minds scrambling for excuses. "How funny," Bradley continued, perfectly at ease. "Two engaged people, two married people, all ending up on the same ship. What are the odds?" Vanessa's laugh cracked mid-breath. "Yes, what are the odds?" I sipped my drink, savoring the taste of expensive bubbles and slow panic. "Oh, Daniel," I said, turning to him. "You didn't tell me you'd invited company on your business trip." The way his face froze, that was the moment I knew the power had shifted. For the first time in months, I wasn't the woman being lied to. I was the woman holding the stage. Bradley raised his glass. "To unexpected reunions," he said smoothly. We clinked, the four of us, the sound sharp as breaking glass. When the toast ended, Vanessa excused herself to get some air. Daniel followed seconds later, muttering something about checking the deck. Bradley and I didn't move. We just watched the storm brewing through the reflection in the window, two silhouettes arguing against the backdrop of a bleeding sunset. "She's cornered," Bradley murmured. "He's desperate." I tilted my head, watching Daniel's hand rise in frustration, her arms crossing in defense. The wind caught her scarf, sending it fluttering into the sea. The symbolism was almost poetic. "Phase 1 complete," I said softly. Bradley smiled. "And phase 2? I turned from the window, the taste of victory lingering on my tongue. "Now," I said, "we let them unravel." By morning, whispers had begun to spread among the passengers, the kind of gossip that travels faster than Wi-Fi at sea. Someone had seen a man and a woman arguing on deck 10 late last night. Someone else said the same woman had run into another man in the lobby hours earlier, her fiancé. Cruise ships are floating towns, secrets don't survive long here. I found Bradley at breakfast, sitting at the far end of the terrace overlooking endless blue. His demeanor was calm, but his eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. "They fought until almost 2, he said, stirring his coffee. I could hear her crying through the wall. I nodded slowly. "He used to make me cry like that. It's almost poetic." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rhythmic hush of waves. Around us, the world was all laughter and pancakes, oblivious to the fact that two people were dismantling a love affair one gesture at a time. "What's next?" Bradley asked. I smiled faintly. We stop watching from the shadows. Let's see how they perform under pressure. Later that afternoon, we joined the snorkeling excursion, the same one Daniel and Vanessa had booked. The water was clear, turquoise, impossibly calm. We boarded the smaller boat that would take us to the reef. And there they were, already seated near the front, avoiding each other's eyes. Bradley and I walked past them as if they didn't exist. I let my shoulder brush Daniel's as I passed. His entire body went rigid. The guide began his cheerful safety speech, but my husband was too busy staring at me, at us. Bradley handed me sunscreen, his hand lingering on my shoulder just long enough to make it believable. The sun, the sea, the proximity, all perfectly staged. Vanessa's face was a painting of tension. "You know her?" the guide asked casually, nodding at me. Her smile looked painted on. "Not really. Just, ran into her before." "Oh," he said innocently, "you must have been on the same cruise." Bradley hid a laugh behind his sunglasses. When we finally reached the reef, I dove into the water, letting the cool silence swallow everything. For a few minutes, I wasn't the betrayed wife or the co-conspirator. I was just weightless, suspended between sky and sea, letting saltwater erase the last traces of humiliation. When I surfaced, Daniel was watching me from the boat, expression unreadable. I floated there for a heartbeat, letting him see how calm I was. No pleading. No tears. Just serenity, the kind that terrifies guilty men. Back on deck, Vanessa grabbed his arm. "You said she wouldn't be here," she hissed. I pretended not to hear, but Bradley caught every word. That night, we met again on the observation deck, where the ocean glittered like scattered diamonds. "They're cracking," he said. "He looks haunted. She looks ready to implode." "Good," I whispered. "Let them." Bradley leaned on the railing beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "You know," he said softly, "when this started, I thought I just wanted revenge. But now..." I turned toward him, searching his expression. "Now what?" He smiled faintly. "Now I just want to see how this ends." For a moment, the air between us felt different, heavier, charged with something that had nothing to do with betrayal. Below us, laughter echoed from the lower deck, Vanessa's laugh, brittle and too loud. Daniel's voice followed, sharp with frustration. I didn't look away from the horizon when I said it. "It's ending," I murmured. "They just don't know it yet." That night, after the midnight show, the ship lit up like a taped-together constellation, cheap LEDs, polished brass, and the kind of music meant to make strangers sway closer. I watched from the railing as couples drifted and kids chased glowing ice cream. Up here, the world felt both infinite and very small. Bradley found me by the pool, his jacket slung over one shoulder despite the heat. He moved with that quiet efficiency the world rewards, direct, unshowy, lethal when necessary. "I've made a reservation at the piano bar," he said, voice low. "Thought we could run an experiment." "Experiment?" I raised an eyebrow. "Do explain." He smiled without teeth, that small, dangerous grin. "We test how honest they are when they think they're safe. A little social pressure. A few well-timed questions. Watch their faces." I let him lead. The piano bar was dark in a way that made people feel small and visible at the same time. Plush chairs, cocktails on silver trays, a pianist who could make a sad song sound like the end of an era. We sat at a table with a perfect view of the entrance. Bradley ordered scotch, neat. I ordered a mocktail that read like sophistication without need for explanation. The plan was simple: let Vanessa think she'd already won. Let her gloat in public. Then, when she was sure of the narrative, we'd quietly rearrange it. Timing mattered. Cruelty without timing is just noise. They arrived later than we expected, as if they were rehearsing their spontaneity. Vanessa walked like she owned the room. Daniel tried to look casual and failed. They slid into a booth near ours, the space between them a mixture of familiarity and a stranger's caution. Vanessa laughed too loudly at a joke Daniel made, his smile never quite reached his eyes. Bradley waited until the pianist hit the soft bridge of a song and then, casually, like someone tossing a pebble into an otherwise calm pool, he called the waiter over. "Can we get the house champagne for the table?" he asked, loud enough for our nearby companions to hear. The waiter obliged, flutes arrived, fizzy and innocent. Bradley raised his glass in a toast almost nonchalantly. "To new horizons," he said, voice warm. "And to honesty. May we all be brave enough to tell the truth when it matters." Vanessa blinked, then laughed, the sound like glass under pressure. "Oh, yes," she said, sweetly. "Honesty. My favorite." The pianist changed the tune to something with a swing. People talked louder, the room simmered. Bradley leaned toward me, whispering, "Now." He turned back to Vanessa with a friendly smile that did not reach his eyes. "So, Vanessa," he said, easy. "How long has Daniel been your confidant?" Her laugh fluttered like a small flag. "Confidant?" she echoed, playing for any sympathy in the room. "Oh, we're just friends from work." "He's so kind." "Just friends from work taking romantic cruises together?" Bradley's tone was mild, the words were heavier than they seemed. He lifted his glass as if to sip, then held it midair and watched her closely. A hush settled over the immediate circle, not the whole bar, but enough people to make a ring of cold air tighten around their table. Daniel's jaw moved, he swallowed. His hand found Vanessa's, at first as a reflex, then with something like plea. "It's not what it looks like," he began, but his voice lacked the conviction of a practiced liar. Vanessa's smile thinned. "It's business," she said too quickly. Her sentence crumpled as if under weight. For a heartbeat she looked real, then she coached herself back into performance. "We were just celebrating after a successful conference. That's all." Bradley's eyes were steady, patient. "Ah. Celebrating. And Bradley?" He popped the question as if it were the most natural name in the world. "How long did you say you and Vanessa were engaged again?" Bradley blinked, startled, then realized he'd been named. He straightened. "Since last fall," he said. "We were planning a June wedding." Vanessa's face tightened. Her script had been interrupted, she flailed, searching for the next line. Daniel's hand trembled when he covered it with his. The people at nearby tables leaned in slightly, curious now. Tourists love a story, a ship full of bored people is fertile ground. I felt none of the triumph I imagined I would. Instead, there was a brittle sadness, a small animal of grief crouched in my ribs. But it served me well. Triumph can look ugly, composed grief looks more dangerous. The pianist rolled into a softer chord and the room's attention frayed back to the steady hum of conversation. Vanessa excused herself, abrupt, and fled toward the restrooms. Daniel stayed, face ashen, and muttered something about needing air. When he left, I watched him go with the patience of someone cataloging evidence. Bradley touched my hand, a light confirmation. "They're rattled," he said quietly. "We keep poking." We did. Over the next 2 days we were masterful, not vicious, just uncomfortably persistent. A casually asked question here, an overheard reference there. We arranged for their dinner seating to be near ours twice. We left little, found items, a napkin with a lipstick stain placed on their side table, then, accidentally, bumped into it and laughed about how clumsy we were. Small things, precise and humiliating because they were public and understated. The ship provided the perfect stage, public enough for witnesses, intimate enough to magnify shame. On the third night, under a sky so black the stars were knives, Vanessa came to my door. She knocked once, then twice. I opened without asking who it was. She stood there, an unraveling thread of makeup, eyes red-rimmed. You don't understand, she said, breathless. I didn't plan for this. Daniel and we didn't mean, her words collapsed into sobs. I closed the door softly behind her and stepped aside. You planned to sleep with him on a cruise, I said. My voice was calm. That is planning. She flinched as if slapped. I love Bradley, she whispered, as if confession could rewind time. I do. I love him. But, she stopped, powerless to finish. I met Bradley, I said. We spoke. He's not an idiot. The sentence was both true and small. She sank onto the edge of the couch. I thought I could have both, she admitted finally. He makes me feel special in a way I'm not used to. You made vows to someone else, I said. So did I. The words landed like coals. She stared at her hands as if they were foreign objects. What are you going to do? She asked, voice raw. I sat opposite her, the quiet between us full of everything that had already been said without sound. What I already did, I replied. I came prepared to see the truth. I came prepared to meet Bradley. And I came prepared to make sure the story they're telling themselves doesn't survive papering over with champagne. She let out a short, helpless laugh. You're cruel. Or you were careless, I said. There's a difference. She looked at me then, and for a moment the woman on my doorstep was not my enemy but a frightened girl who had embroidered her life with lies and expected it to keep shape. What do you want? She asked. Closure, I answered. And for you to know what it's like to be seen honestly. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, a small, hard decision glinted there. I'm leaving Daniel, she said suddenly. I can't keep pretending. Her confession shifted something inside me like a loose tile finally falling into place. It wasn't the finale I expected, it was something quieter, less neat. Her leaving might not fix anything. It might make things worse. But it was a turn, and turns create motion. We heard a muted clatter in the hall, a suitcase wheel, a hurried step. The ship hummed around us, indifferent and enormous. Outside, the ocean swallowed the horizon whole. I didn't say anything. I only watched the outline of her face in the low lamplight and waited to see what the next morning would bring. Dawn came thin and washed out, like an underexposed photograph. Vanessa's bed was empty when I checked. Her makeup-streaked tissues were a small shrine of the night's drama. I would have expected relief to follow her departure, but instead there was a curious stillness, an aftermath that smelled like old smoke. By lunch, word had traveled in the way it always does on board, not by direct announcement, but by the slow clicking of whispers. People speculated, runaway bride? Dramatic breakup? A messy love triangle? Cruise gossip degrades into entertainment and then evaporates. For Bradley and me, the consequence was immediate. They kept to their cabin, and Daniel's absence at public events grew conspicuous. We used it. Bradley began dropping small, considerate gestures in public, a gentle compliment to the captain after the trivia night, a sincere thumbs up to a waiter. His charm softened him in the eyes of observers, it made him appear reasonable, grounded, wronged rather than vindictive. That contrast is powerful. If one appears composed and the other frantic, sympathy tends to drift toward the composed. Late that afternoon, I found Daniel on the promenade deck, hands jammed deep into his pockets, the ocean slapping at the hull. He looked older, like someone who'd been rereading the same bad news for days. When he saw me, his face folded in a way I hadn't seen since before we had children, a look of someone who suddenly understood the cost of his choices. He didn't speak at first. We walked together a few paces in silence, the ship's wake a white line slicing the water. Finally he said, low and tight, you made this public. The accusation was half confession. I made it visible, I replied. Because it was already visible. You were just pretending it wasn't. He laughed once, a sound like a broken lock. You didn't have to do this like this. He kept his voice small, as if trying not to wake something else. You could have talked. We could have, he trailed off, guilty for the options he had never tried to choose before. Talked? I repeated. You booked a romantic suite, Daniel. For two. With her name on the confirmation. What conversation were you waiting for? My tone was level, the heat had drained from it. There was no accusation anymore, just blunt fact. He closed his eyes. I don't know who I am anymore, he admitted, a confession that was both shocking and oddly human. Sometimes I thought I was trying to feel alive. Sometimes I thought I was drowning and wanted someone to hold the life preserver. His hand clenched around the rail. But I wasn't pretending for her. I was pretending for you. For the life we built. That life, I said softly, was built by both of us. You chose to add a secret wing. My voice was not triumphant, it was tired in a new, deep way. I didn't set out to punish you. I set out to be seen. He watched my profile for a long beat. Are you satisfied? He asked. Watching this all unravel? No, I said honestly. I'm not satisfied. Satisfaction would be a different ending. This isn't about winning. It's about ending what shouldn't have started. He looked past me at the endless water, and for the first time I saw him without the armor of a husband, the surprised man who hadn't known he could lose so much. I don't want a divorce, he said then, whispering. The words landed like a dropped glass. I felt a strange, almost tender pang. Then start being honest, I said. If you want something to be fixed, fix it. Don't expect me to be the one who patches a life you've made holes in. He nodded, slow and without hope. He had no map for this. None of us did. But his admission, tiny, fragile, hinted at a thread still attached to the fabric between us. That night, there was an announcement about an impromptu deck party. The ship's crew knew a good story when they saw one. We stood somewhere near the back, Bradley and I side by side, two witnesses with different motives. People danced, couples twined. The ocean moved slow and steady under everything. A woman drifted by, overheard a slurred conversation, and nodded at us with the intimacy of strangers who share gossip. I heard Vanessa left, she said, loud-mouthed. Says she's going back to fix things with Bradley. Her eyes were bright with a rumor's power. Bradley's jaw tightened for a moment, and then he laughed like a man who had just been given a new variable to test. Oh. Well, life is weird, he said, politely, and I felt that the story might not end the way any of us imagined. Outside, the stars kept their indifferent watch. My chest felt hollow in an unfamiliar way, not emptier, but newly rearranged. I wanted an ending that felt neat, a tidy bow on the grief. But human endings seldom cooperate. They frustrate, fray, and sometimes fold into something else entirely. As the ship hummed on through the dark, I closed my eyes and let the salt air clear my head. Tomorrow promised more movement, more small revelations. The week was only halfway over, the ocean was patient. The day before disembarkation, the ship announced a photo op at the captain's table. Passengers could buy the glossy memento, smiles fixed and hair done. It was the kind of forced joy cruise companies sell, everyone cheerfully captured as if none of the undercurrents had ever existed. I signed up, curious to see a captured moment of the mess we'd made. We posed in a row, Bradley next to me, Daniel beside Vanessa. Cameras flashed, the photographer chirped platitudes about memories. In the instant the shutter clicked, all the masks rearranged themselves. The image would be polished and cropped, but I knew what the pixels would hide: the strain in Daniel's smile, the forced set of Vanessa's jaw, the way Bradley's hand hovered halfway between comfort and ownership. The photo would be printed, mounted on glossy cardboard, and sold to people who preferred nostalgia to truth. After the shoot, Bradley and I bought 2 copies, tucked them into the ship's photo envelope and smiled like anyone who had taken a vacation's worth of pictures. Then we did something small and precise. We took one copy and left it in a frame on their cabin's vanity with a post-it note, "Memories fade. Truth doesn't." It was a small thing, petty in the way kindness can sometimes be cruel, but it landed exactly where it needed to. Vanessa found it first, the betrayal of the staged photo followed by a silent message. She crumpled it in her hands and then, astonishingly, sat down and wrote Bradley a message, short, raw, "I'm sorry. I thought I loved you. I don't know anymore." She left it on the nightstand where Bradley would find it. He found the note hours later, after she had already gone ashore for an excursion. He read it twice, then thrice, as if scanning handwritten confessions could conjure clarity. The note's undoing quality was brutal in its simplicity. He'd been building his life on curated certainty, the note introduced an uncurated doubt. When Vanessa returned to the ship that evening, the three of us converged in the corridor like pieces in a chess endgame. Her face was raw, Bradley's expression closed in on itself. Daniel hovered, a spectator who had become the centerpiece by accident and cruelty alike. "What now?" Bradley asked, voice low. He sounded young in a way that made the moment ache with possibility. Vanessa looked at him and then at me. "I can't ask you to forgive me," she said finally, the words clumsy and honest. "I don't know who I am anymore. But I can tell you this, I'm leaving Daniel. I have to stop being both." The decision landed with a finality that felt almost like surrender. Bradley's breath hitched. For a sliver of a second, everything in him seemed to recalibrate. He reached for her hand, tentative and cautious, like a man who had been given a second chance and was afraid to be clumsy with it. Daniel watched them, his face a map of mistakes made and a future uncertain. He turned away slowly and walked toward the rail, the ship's wake a white line that looked like an escape route if only one could jump the right way. He didn't run. Most men who make noise in life don't have the legs for running when the music stops. I stayed where I was, anchored by the knowledge that the week had rearranged things in ways neat and ragged. Vanessa and Bradley moved toward each other with an awkward, trembling intimacy that might or might not hold. Daniel remained, a figure shaped by the strain of choices. The ship carried us on, indifferent and true. That night, I sat on my balcony and watched the shoreline approach like a question. The trip had started as revenge and ended in confessions, in the messy honesty of people forced to face themselves. I felt lighter, strange and unfamiliar, as if the unpacking had already begun and the weight I'd carried for months was being catalogued and donated. There was no triumphant scene, no dramatic confrontation where justice was served in perfect proportion. Real life rarely offers that kind of symmetry. Instead there were small ruptures, apologies, and the quiet work of decisions. And as the harbor lights drew nearer, I realized the most important thing I'd gained was not the satisfaction of seeing them exposed, but the reclaiming of my center, a small, steady truth that had nothing to do with them. I tucked my copy of the captain's photo into my bag. It was a memento, yes, but not of victory. It was a reminder that some memories are sharper because of what they hide. Outside, the city lights winked awake. Inside, I felt the slow, solid pulse of someone ready to move forward on terms that belonged to her. We disembarked under a sky that smelled faintly of diesel and possibility. People hugged, dragged suitcases, complained about lines. Couples wept, children complained about missing the pool. We stepped off the ship into a world that did not know our names. Our drama would dissolve into phrases at brunch tables and then evaporate. Bradley and Vanessa stayed together, at least long enough for her to move back to his city and attempt to untangle the mess. They were both young enough to make mistakes with a margin for recovery. Whether their new foundation would hold I couldn't say. People are complicated, and love is often a risky, imprecise experiment. Daniel and I did not part with dramatic vows or courtroom scenes. We sat in a small agency office the week after we returned and talked, properly, awkwardly, like adults who had failed at being honest for a long time. There was anger, certainly. There was grief for the easy illusions we'd both tended. In the end, we decided to separate. Amicable is too tidy a word for it, but we were fair. We split things, arranged custody, and did the painstaking work of untying shared months. It hurt, but it felt right in that honest, slow way that healing sometimes does. Months later, I rented a little apartment by a park. It wasn't a cabin in the woods or a sprawling estate, it was modest and full of light. I bought a plant that stubbornly refused to die. I rejoined my book club and started taking pottery classes. Small things stitched me back together. Sometimes I caught myself replaying scenes from the cruise, the captain's toast, the piano bar, the note on the vanity. Those moments were short and sharp, like plucking a string and hearing a note that lingers. But the loudest memory I kept was not Vanessa's betrayal nor Daniel's betrayal. It was Bradley's steadiness the morning we met at the cafe, the way he extended his hand and offered partnership in outrage. He and I stayed in contact for a while after everything settled. We never became lovers, the geometry of our connection had been practical, forged in the heat of mutual hurt. Instead, we became a quiet reminder to each other that sometimes the people you meet in ruin help you see where the foundation was cracked in the first place. People ask about revenge as if it's an action that wraps things up neatly. It rarely is. What I learned is that exposure doesn't always fix what's broken, but honesty creates a framework where decisions can actually be made. I didn't set out to ruin lives, I set out to stop living a lie. In doing so, I pulled a few threads, and a lot of knots came undone. A year later, on an ordinary Tuesday, I received an unexpected email from Bradley. Hope you're well. Saw a pottery exhibit this weekend and thought of you. B. I smiled, saved the message, and replied with a short note about a new glaze I'd tried. Sometimes closure arrives not as a shout but as a small, ordinary kindness. The cruise had been a messy chapter, full of rage, cunning, and unexpected mercy. In the end, the thing that felt like winning was not revenge or humiliation but the fact that I had reclaimed the right to direct my life's next scene. If anyone asked me whether I would do it all again, I couldn't answer in a single, neat line. But I would say this: I am glad I chose to be visible. I am glad I refused to let a private betrayal become the story that defined me. The ocean carried us away from a week of wreckage. I stepped onto dry land with my hands steadier than they had been in a long time, and for the first time in years, the future felt like my own.